So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our next webinar in the Gender Transformative Research Methodologies Community of Practice, opening the toolkit. So we're really delighted today to have Ana Maria Piers Valencia with us, and we're going to get started very soon. Maybe we'll just leave it one more minute to see if other people join. So whilst we're waiting, please just introduce yourself in the chat, just share your name, maybe where you're joining from today. On a scale of 1 to 10, how hot are you in the heat wave if you're experiencing that like we are in Europe? And yeah, anything else you want to tell us today about why you're joining, maybe what you hope to achieve or learn through being here today. But a big warm welcome to everyone. So yeah, we'll just start in a minute, but please do introduce yourself in the chat. Okay, let's get going. So as you all know, we're very excited to be bringing this series to you this year around the Gender Transformative Research Methods Toolkit. So this incredible collection of tools for you to all use in your research and be thinking together and working together to make research more gender transformative. So today we're looking at a tool called Gender Transformative Adaptation of the Participatory Integrated Climate Services Agriculture Approach, or PICSA. Quite a mouthful, but I'm really excited to learn more about this. And I think more than ever, we all know we need to have climate adaptation approaches and gender transformative approaches as well in our climate services. So let's think about what we are going to learn together today. So we're going to discover how the participatory integrated climate services for agriculture methodology has been adapted to have a more gender transformative approach. So this is really exciting. It was an existing methodology and it's been adapted to be more gender transformative. So that should inspire us to think about how other tools might be able to be more gender transformative. So you're also, as gender researchers, going to learn how to spot opportunities to adapt tools and perhaps work with multiple stakeholders and learn from other methodologies. So Ana Maria is really going to share her experience of how she managed to adapt this tool. And then we're going to understand together through our discussion how gender transformative approaches can contribute to more equitable research and outcomes. So that's what we're going to be doing together in the next hour. And yeah, a big warm welcome to Ana Maria. She is the Gender and Social Impact Project Leader and the country representative for Peru at the Alliance of Biodiversity in Seattle. So thank you for joining us today. So before we hand it over to Ana Maria, we've got a little poll for you. We just want to get a sense of who's in the room. So let me launch the poll. So you should see on your screen now 2 questions. The first thing we want to know is, have you used PICSA before? You might definitely be using it a lot in your work, never heard of it, or maybe you're not sure. And then, do you work in climate information services? So just give a few minutes or so to see the answers coming in.
Okay, just one PICSA fellow.
Yes. So you get a sneak peek, Ana Maria. No one else can see the answers yet.
Oh, okay.
So let's just see, we've got 13 people have responded. So if anyone, last 30 seconds, if anyone else feels they want to submit their response to the poll, otherwise we can, yeah, end it. There you go, one more person. And let's see then all together the results. And yeah, Ana Maria, was this what you were thinking? So one person, as you said, has used PICSA before, and then everyone else, no. So they're really here to learn what it is. And then we do have 43% of people that are working in climate information services. So, and then couple people that are not sure or not yet, maybe they're looking to, and some people not. So yeah, a good mixture of people across that one. Great.
Okay, that's great.
Great.
Great to
Wonderful.
know also.
So, one final thing just to remind everyone before I hand it over to Anna Maria. So, as you know, we like to use Easy Retro. If you've joined us for one of our webinars before, I'm just going to put the link in the chat to that, or you can scan this QR code. So, at any point during Anna Maria's presentation, if there's a question that comes to mind or a comment, feel free to either pop it in the chat here in Zoom or pop it onto our Easy Retro board. If you're joining via your phone, there's a drop down menu. So you'll see that we've actually got 3 boards. So you can submit your questions, but you can also share your own experiences of working in climate information services. And you can also access some resources, a bit more information about Anna Maria and the toolkit on the resource board. And feel free also to share your own resources because we are a community of practice and we all want to learn together. So with that, I'm going to hand it over so we can all learn more about your work with this very interesting tool. Thanks, Anna Maria.
Thank you, Jessica. Let me then share my screen. Okay. So, what do I do this? Let me see. Okay. Okay. Do you see it?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, great. Okay, so thanks a lot, Jessica, for the introduction. And nice to have everyone here, and great to hear that many of you are interested in this topic and have worked with this topic. So for you, all of those who work with climate information services know that there is a gap, this gap between climate information and its users. So there are very vital decisions that farmers need to do, when to plant, what to plant, at what moments in the year, and other decisions that are affected by climate variability. And we know that this climate variability is getting worse, worse and worse, and that is definitely having an impact in productivity and an impact in those decisions. It is making the making of these decisions very difficult for farmers. So, climate information services are there to precisely help farmers in making those decisions. Um, and it follows these knowledge flows where you first need to understand farmer needs, what do they need to know, what are the specific information they require at what specific level, with which accuracy. Then work on those predictions that are accurate for the type that and that respond to the needs of farmers, those needs that you have identified, right, in terms of specific locations, geographical locations, and also to specific crops. There is also a component around institutional capacity and building institutional capacities to make those predictions like in a sustainable manner, and also for them to be useful for institutions and local actors that work with agriculture and support the smallholder farmers. And then also there is a recognition about, and these are the pillars that you see on the left side. There's a recognition that it's there. There are not only that is not only about producing the information, but it's also about translating that information, transferring the information, and also ensuring that it is useful for farmers to actually make those decisions. To make that what they call climate smart decision making, right? But traditionally, the problem is that traditionally there's been much more focus on this part of the second part of the knowledge flow, which is the prediction. So there's been much more emphasis on making those predictions more accurate, more specific, more geographically relevant, and that's fantastic for sure. But the problem is that has a little bit neglected other parts of this knowledge flow, in particular that transferring, that ensuring that it's useful, and sometimes also understanding users' needs. So that's how this methodology, the PICSA methodology, emerges. It is a participatory methodology. It stands for Participatory Integrated Climate Services for Agriculture. And it's a methodology that brings, that aims to help farmers make decisions about what they want to do in their farms, how they want to plan their farming activities each season based on climatic information, but also based on the livelihood options they have available in each context. So it's very nice because it brings together that part of climate information, historical record, forecasts. Together, it links it with this concept of options by context, right? Understanding what options are better in each context, which crops, which kind of livestock activities, other livelihoods that the family might have, and consider those options that are relevant in each context. And the context can be not only agroecological, but also socioeconomical, and link it to that climate information, right? It is made up of these participatory decision-making tools that you'll see in a minute I'll show you. And it's, yeah, and it basically is made to help farmers decide what to do and how to respond to that climate variability and the information they are getting. So these are the PICSA steps. It's made up, so the methodology is supposed to be delivered through workshops, through a series of workshops or small gatherings with groups of farmers. So each step will be a different gathering with farmers, and you go step by step, also building capacities around understanding concepts that are relevant for for climate information, and then looking at the predictions and making sense of them based on each farmer's context. So the first steps are about understanding what are the farmers' needs, so what are they do, like what are the relevant livelihoods, how is the seasonal calendar. Then they start talking about climate historical information, how those relate to farmer perceptions. Also, there is also a little bit about understanding what does a millimeter of rain means in terms of like concrete, very concrete practical examples. There is a section about probabilities and understanding how probabilities work, and how these are related to forecasts. And then you start working on the options. Now that we understand how to kind of read or make sense of this climate information. So what are the options that we have? And there are also a number of steps that take farmers through an analysis of these different options. There are also tools like a participatory budget. And those are all meant for farmers to finally decide what they want to do in their farms based on that climate information. The thing with this process is, as you can see, it can take a long time, and it can be also sometimes resource intensive, and the team I was working with in Guatemala noticed also that people, like different teams that were working and delivering the methodology, were having different approaches to how to deliver it. And sometimes there were merged steps, for example, or sometimes they will skip steps altogether. But also, and most interestingly, they were designing or developing ways to deliver the information in a way that was more useful for farmers, or that was more practical, or was more understandable. And they saw the opportunity to build kind of like a toolkit that will tease out more the manual, the original PICSA manual, and give technical teams that would like to use the methodology like more concrete examples, and like almost like a set of sheets that you can take to the field and work with those to deliver these workshop steps. And these sheets will also come with tips, recommendations, things that other teams have done in certain contexts that work out well. For example, to explain the concept of probabilities, that is a difficult concept to explain. And here's also where we saw the opportunity to address some gender and inclusion issues that had not been really explored in the application of this methodology. So since they were doing this toolkit, then we decided, okay, this is a good opportunity to go and look carefully at some of these steps and see how we can make it better, so that gender issues come out more strongly and they are more relevant when those decisions, those farming decisions are made, right? Okay. We've also seen that the tool had some limitations. Like we've observed that there were these weaknesses in terms of how gender was being addressed in these steps, but there were other things that we were noticing and that the teams that we were working were noticing. No? So first, for example, was that there were high levels of women participating in PICSA workshops, especially in contexts where there was high male out migration. And that might be influencing on the fact that there was lower action linked to this PICSA process. So although these women were participating in the PICSA workshops, it was not so clear whether these women were being able to apply the information when they were back at their farms. We saw this in examples in Honduras and Guatemala. We also noticed that the tool disaggregated information by gender, but this information was not really being problematized or used as part of the decision-making process. The tool also didn't recognize or incorporate traditional knowledge about, weather and how to predict weather and how to understand weather. Some people, some practitioners and people who were using the methodology have been trying to incorporate it because they saw a value in it, but it was not really institutionalized, and it was not really done like systematically in a specific step. Also, we noticed that certain steps were more challenging and require more guided facilitation. It was also a long process, and that led to skipping sometimes or abbreviating steps. So we have to take that in mind, into consideration to when we were thinking about these adjustments and these additions. And the last thing is that we also saw that materials like formats or worksheets or scripts will be helpful for teams in their implementation. So how we could also make use of that to integrate these gender considerations. So we decided we look at the methodology and we identify 4 steps where we could make key changes that wouldn't add a lot to the methodology, but will make the changes that we wanted to see. And these changes aimed at integrating gender and social considerations in the selection of options, facilitate reflection about the distribution of resources and tasks in the family, in the farm, and integrate also and recognize local and traditional knowledge regarding weather and climate. So I'm going to explain to you a little bit of these changes, or what we proposed as changes. And for those of you who have worked with PICSA, maybe you can tell me later how do you think this will work. Anyway, so the first change is this on step 6. Here the farmer were asked to think about practices related to the crops they wanted to choose. or the options they were considering, and then kind of figure out whether these practices, and these were practices, of course, that were related to responding to the climate forecast, or to the issues that they were, that they were identifying through the climate information services. So they will work on these practices, list these practices, and then determine, who does it, who benefits. But what's happening here is that in many cases, especially in Latin America, people were responding only like, yeah, who does it? Everyone does it. Like the whole family, we all do it. And all the practices, or with few exceptions, that was the response. Like the whole family is involved, and who benefits? The whole family benefits, right? And that was like very vague, and probably not true, and and we were missing a lot of nuance into that response. So one thing that we proposed was to use a different way to ask those questions. So instead of who does it in general, like is it only men, or is it men with women's help? Is it men, or is it women with men's help? Or is it only women? Or is it men and women equally, right? Same with who benefits. Is it only men? Is it only women? Or is it men more than women who benefit? Or is it women maybe more than men who benefit? Or men and women equally? When you ask this way, we've seen in other instances, focus group and other exercises we've done, when you ask this way, then you definitely get people to really think, right? To really think, okay, well, maybe men with women's help, or maybe men get more than women, right? You get to people to think about these differences, and this this distribution that sometimes is not really equal. Another step we worked was with this participatory budget. This is a very interesting exercise. Farmers tend to really like it, but it's very time intensive. But in this case, we proposed a more targeted discussion around family labor. So farmers will be asked to calculate the cost of family labor related to the activities. How much will it cost if they had to hire laborers for each activity? How much will it cost if they had to buy food for the laborers, right? And the idea was for facilitators to highlight the value of the contribution made by different members of the household, to highlight like how these costs were really, like, once these costs have been estimated, how will have affected the profits. And in that sense, so how was this income, right? Or the cost that is generated for these activities compensating, benefiting different members of the household who contributed those to those costs. And the idea was also to emphasize that recognizing this contribution will ensure that, of course, the production or the family labor farm will continue having this labor in the long term. And here, this was a step. Step G is when the farmer finally makes a choice, right? After considering all the options that they have available, looking at the budgets, looking at the predictions of climate, and the farmers have to make a choice of what they are going to do in their farms. After they make a choice, this step in the original manual was a bit vague in the sense that it suggested practitioners to try to support farms in ways in which they could adopt the practices that they've chosen, right? So maybe see if there were other programs in the community or other organizations working on these programs, and try to look for support with them, or if there was a scope within the activities of their same organization, try to figure out how can they support farmers in adopting these actions. But it was very vague, and we thought there was an opportunity here to have a more detailed discussions around this, the actual adoption of the practices that the farmer had decided on to respond to the climate situation, no? to the forecast and to whatever was going to happen in terms of climate variability. So we look at this. We took this tool from a document, a publication made by colleagues at IITA, Gender Transformative Decision Making in Agricultural Technologies, and this was a very nice tool that will allow farmers to reflect on their capacity to successfully adopt new practices. And it will look at the distribution of tasks and responsibilities and the access to resources in the household. So it was, I think it takes also from the gender balance tree, for those who know GALS. It's very similar, the logic, but the tool looked specifically at challenges in adoption. And so it looks at specific technologies or practices that a household want to adopt, and tease out what are the challenges that women may face, that men may face, and how can women respond to those challenges, men respond to those challenges, and the household as a whole respond to those challenges. So the tool helps producers develop an action plan to support themselves as a family in adopting these practices. And it also highlights that, like as the gender balance tree does, it highlights the differences and inequalities, the imbalances in terms of what each one in the household has as resources to help that adoption. But also, interestingly, it highlights the need, like finally it highlights the need for cooperation, how men and women and the whole household needs to work together to be able to do what they have planned to do, to achieve what they want to achieve, and adopt these practices that they've decided they want to follow. And then finally, the step H on seasonal forecast, on short-term forecast. We also added an adaptation. These steps aims at helping farmers to understand the seasonal forecast and how to use it. Like it works with examples of rain forecast, and until this point, they have made decisions based on historical climate data. The idea is that the seasonal forecast can add information to that historical data. So what we did here was we proposed asking about traditional weather forecasting practices. So, for example, bioindicators. How do you usually, traditionally, how did your grandparents, or what was the cultural ways in which you will forecast the weather? And this will help identify and recognize this traditional knowledge and allow farmers to feel that they also can draw on their knowledge and experience and compare it with the scientific data provided in the forecast. That was interesting because when you present this forecast, specifically the short-term forecast, there is also a degree of uncertainty, right? There is a degree of uncertainty, and actually the PICSA method has some exercises to work with farmers through this concept of uncertainty. So what we thought was valuable about this, because at the end of the day, you present the shortcast, you say there is a level of uncertainty here, so it might be like this, but it might not be like this. So one other piece of information that you can consider is this traditional way, or these traditional practices you have, right? Consider what you have seen, how, given that knowledge you have, consider that along with what I'm telling you, right? And that can help you also close that level of uncertainty. So that was the idea here. And also, for sure, what I was saying, draw on their knowledge and experience, and make farmers feel that they could use that knowledge also to compare with scientific data. We were able to pilot, we haven't piloted these changes completely. We were only able to pilot the challenge action tree, so this one. We were working with a group that was already going through the PICSA methodology, so it was too late for us to go back to the previous steps and try to do the adjustments, but we were able to do the challenge action tree. And it was very well received, and in this case, because it was this specific context in Guatemala with indigenous people, female leaders were prepared in advance to lead this activity, and these women have already before worked on doing the option by context metrics and the participatory budget. They have led the activities also before, so the team decided that it was good that they also would lead the action challenge 3, and that was really important, that it was these female leaders, these women leaders from the community who were doing the exercise. And what was interesting also was that it really generated discussions around sorry, I have a SAC practices, climate smart practices, climate smart agriculture practices, CSA, discussions around these climate smart agriculture practices and how they could relate to economic empowerment and gender equality. So how they relate to this distribution of tasks and resources in the household, and how it could help households to maybe have a more balanced distribution, and how there was needed this collaboration in the household, and this mutual support was needed for being able to actually successfully adopt these CSA practices. Okay, that's all from me for now. And I had some questions, maybe to have a discussion, but we are also for sure, of course, happy to respond to your questions. These are the 3 questions for discussion. Perhaps you can start thinking about them. First is if anyone has worked on climate information services with a gender responsive or a gender transformative component, and what was their key learning around implementing it, and of course, how did you do it? The second question is, how can we embed gender transformative approaches in the delivery of PICSA beyond sex disaggregated groups? So that was something that I thought about a lot, in terms of not only like, okay, changing the steps as I showed you, but also like in the delivery, in the way the teams deliver this information, interact with farmer groups, how are ways in which that delivery could also be gender transformative. And the other thing that would be interesting for me, and perhaps for others too, is how can traditional knowledge be recognized more in climate information services or early warning systems? Okay. I don't know. Yeah.
We have one question already in the chat from Caroline. So she's very, thanks, Caroline, for kicking us off with the questions and the discussion. I think you can see the chat by Anna Maria, but I'll read it as well. So who were the female leaders? How were they chosen? Is this something that could be introduced to agricultural extension officers to roll out as well? Thanks, Caroline, for the question.
These female leaders, they have been working before with both with the teams, with our teams, and also the local partners we work with in Guatemala. And in fact, it is a model that is being used in Guatemala. In some regions in Guatemala, we have these climate observers, and there are women groups that have become climate observers. And these women groups have been also trained with the PICSA methodology, and they deliver, they are kind of liaisons with other farmers in their community on climate information services. So the way our local partners disseminate information is through some of these leaders and some of these climate observers. And there are other regions where it's not climate observers, but it's like promoters like we call them promoters, but it's like community facilitators that also are trained, and they go and train their peers on specific practices, for example. And that has been very successful in building this, first building these networks of women and collective action around this topic, climate information and preparedness to climate, or adaptation to climate change, but also in changing women's perceptions in the community, or like the perception of women in these communities as you know, as holder of knowledge, right? Like these climate observers are they say themselves at the beginning they were, you know, considered just like the crazy women with the weather, and now people are looking for them to ask them for advice and to ask them what should they do and what should they plant. And that's of course very empowering for these women, and is changing also perceptions around women's role, around women knowledge and position in the community.
Thanks, Anna Maria. Building on that, obviously we have a couple of questions related, even more to the traditional forecasting methods. So Jacqueline's asking, what were some of the traditional forecasting methods you got? And we had a question also on easy retro, which I think you've spoken to a bit, but were the forecasting indicators varied by gender or other intersectionalities? Thanks for those questions.
Regarding the forecasting methods, unfortunately, we haven't done that yet. We haven't piloted that part of the method yet. So I don't have examples to share, unfortunately. But I, like, from other instances, I know, like, in some cases it depends. This is very context specific. So in some cases there are the presence of some birds, for example. Farmers do look at these birds, and when these birds appear, then that means that rains are coming. Or sometimes in insects, there are some this is what I mentioned as bioindicators, right? There are insects, specific insects that appear also in the plants or in specific flowers. And with this, when these insects appear, that means that maybe temperatures are going to be higher in the next few days, or they're going to go lower. It's very context specific, but these are the kinds of bioindicators that I was referring to, or that I hope we can contrast or get to discuss with farmers to contrast with the scientific data. Now, the issue there, of course, is that with climate change, some of these bioindicators have also changed, and sometimes, for example, the birds don't appear anymore and things like that. But still, just I think the fact that we are asking this question, and that we are recognizing these practices and this knowledge is valuable in itself, even though it might be not very relevant to actually make the decision or the prediction, or to make sense of the prediction. Yeah.
Thanks, Anna. I mean, we have another comment from Jacqueline about traditional practice in Kenya. I don't know, Jacqueline, feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to share a bit more about that, and whether that's something that you've come across in your own work or from other types of knowledge.
Yes. I'm not originally Kenyan, but I work in Kenya. But I think it's something that is done across East Africa among pastoralists. So what they do, they look at the intestines when they slaughter a goat, so it can tell them whether there is a drought coming or something like that. So they look at, I think, the color of the intestines, which I found very interesting. And from what I've heard, because I've not seen it myself, but that's what I've heard, I hear that actually it's correct predictions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, as I said, I mean, they're usually like very reliable. The problem is with climate change and climate variability, that reliability is also changing. But yeah, anyway.
Great, thank you. We have another question from Gerald in the chat. If you can see that, Anna, I'll read it out. So we found a challenge when CIS dissemination agents do not differentiate climate or weather information via climate or weather agro advisories. Someone's going to have to explain to me what that is. So how does PICSA address this?
Well, I mean, that's precisely the point of PICSA, right? Because and I guess that's how I understand the question. So you have this climate weather information, and sometimes that's disseminated maybe through radio, or in Central America we use these bulletins, agroclimatic bulletins that go out through farmers associations and government and local organizations, and that only has like the predictions, right? What is going to happen, when it's going to rain, blah blah blah. But agro-advisories then refer to what do we do with that, with those forecasts, right? How do we respond to that? So how do I prepare as a farmer? And that's what PICSA does. PICSA goes through the whole process of going through practices. Okay, so what are practices that we can use to respond to those forecasts, and how those practices fit in my context, in my reality as a farmer, right? Those practices work for me, they don't work for me. And then also, okay, so I was planning to grow maize, but maybe these forecast says that it's better to plant something else, so I can go to a different crop. Am I interested in that crop? Does that crop fit my needs and my conditions? So that's what PICSA does, and that's why it's such a nice methodology, because it goes through that stages. It goes beyond just giving the information and hoping for the best. But as I said, it's a bit resource and time intensive. I guess that's what he was asking. Yeah. Don't know if Catherine wanted to mention something.
I can come in very quickly on question 2, which I understand, if I remember, it's about how can you achieve gender transformation, going beyond just putting people into disaggregated groups. I mean, I think
Right.
there's quite a few methodologies that I know of, which are really good at working at the community level on gender issues. And one of them that I'd recommend is Nurturing Connections. I don't know if you've heard of that, by Helen Keller International. And they've
Yeah.
developed that particularly in Bangladesh, but they do a lot of, it's really interesting actually. They've got a lovely sequence of exercises to be done with couples, to be done with a larger family, to be done with the parents-in-law, and just different levels of the community. And so they discuss gender in context in that way. So that can get the whole community on board. And they find it really important to go beyond that, up to the community level. So I'm sure there's lots of other methods out there that people in this chat know of, but just for example. Yeah.
I'm looking at the example in Ghana. That's nice. That's interesting. Interest integration. That's really interesting. Thanks a lot for sharing.
And we also have a comment from Brenda that they're applying the tools shared, practices, options, matrix, challenge, action trees to empower the agency of farmers in farmer organizations in Uganda and Burundi. So yeah, Brenda, I mean, please feel free to unmute and share a little bit more about your experience using these tools, and anything you might want to share with the community today.
Thanks for sharing, Anne-Marie. The tools that you have shared are actually tools that we've readapted from the girls' methodology. A reason being that one of my colleagues was actively involved in the development of that methodology at Oxfam. So we've made adaptations to these tools, and we are applying them in Uganda and Burundi. And the assignment there is not really focused on gender, but it's more of how do we ensure more inclusivity and participation and engagement of farmers within farm organizations, so that farm organizations are more responsive to the needs of the farmers. So we've done adaptations to these tools to suit the needs of the farmers. And we are in the first year of implementation. And the reaction that we get back from the farmers themselves is, oh, I'd never thought that I can use a tool to help me think about the plan within my household or to really scrutinize what is going on in my household. I think this is good for me to consider, what the dynamics within the households, how we are sharing the roles. So this is how we are applying them. But then the other tool that we are using, I don't know if you've shared it, it's used by also one of my colleagues under what we call the Fair Farmers something, but it's more of costing the labor that is involved when developing when developing our value chains, because the farmers somehow couldn't they couldn't attach cost to the workload that they put in so that they can become credit worthy when they go to borrow their finances. So we took them through a methodology. I'll try to look for a tool and maybe paste it. A methodology where farmers can be able to cost each and everything that they are investing, and then to be able to calculate how much they are worth so that they can be able to borrow to finance their agriculture.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, I also thought that the challenge tree is actually it's a tool for that, like for actually consider options whenever they have like a situation in their household, and they can use it to apply even to other different instances, not necessarily only the agricultural setting. And the participatory budget is always really liked by farmers when they can like lay out what black and white, right? This what am I investing, what am I gaining, what are my costs, and that this is always very much appreciated. This is an exercise that takes, I don't know what's your experience, but the participatory budgets tend to take a long time to do, because also there's a lot especially when you do it in groups, because there's a lot of discussions of what something costs and what not, and so it takes time, but they are always super appreciated, these exercises. They really like having that information laid out like this, and understanding where the money is going and where is it coming, and then having that reflection around the costs that are not monetary is key, I think, to understand the contribution of the different household members.
Great. So we've also had another comment from Caroline, who I think had to drop off, but she's also shared that they had an example of working with local women in Africa on documenting the promotion of local crops that they grow that are drought resistant and are not recognized by mainstream agriculture, and promoted these by the agricultural extension and through women leaders. So, I mean, I don't know if there's anything, you want to say about the sort of link to the traditional knowledge or the kind of observational knowledge of knowing what crops are like more suitable for the changing climate, and how maybe we can empower women leaders to really be able to kind of voice their knowledge, and step into these roles in the value chain.
Yeah, I thought that was like thinking about PICSA in particular. I thought that was an important gap that the methodology was not addressing, in spite of being a very participatory method. And that's interesting also in this case, because it was a very participatory method, and it really intended to even have some gender differentiation information that was collected, but it was not really getting at the issues. It was not really addressing gender issues as part of it, and this blind spot with the local and traditional knowledge was very, very evident. And I'm sure, I mean, as I said, we suggested this change in one of the steps, but I'm sure there are other things that can be done. Of course, not only through PICSA, but also, in general, in how we interact with farmers in terms of adaptation options. When we talk about climate smart agriculture, climate smart practices, there are much more that should be done in terms of recognizing these kind of local strategies before coming with new ones. I think teams are getting better at doing this and are getting better at learning from farmers and experimenting, like doing this more horizontal, having these more horizontal relations with farmers when it comes to making doing trials and things like that, and working on demonstrating plots and things like that in the farms. But it's I think it's still a weak point for those people, for those of us working on climate smart agriculture and climate adaptation for smallholder farmers. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. We've got like 5 more minutes maybe to take some more questions if anyone here has another question or something that they'd like to share about their own experience with climate information services or gender research and methodologies and tools. Or maybe I think we have one more. So no, Brenda is sharing in the chat. Thank you very much. Some of the tools that you mentioned. Maybe Kathy has another question.
Just interested in the last remark about indigenous crops, which are now being called opportunity crops, because I mean, by rebaptizing them, these kind of traditional indigenous crops, they're getting a new value. And there's some wonderful work by the Crop Trust in Britain and Germany, I think, worldwide, and they are working in Latin America to focus on, I think, 2 opportunity crops in 7 selected countries, and how to market them and to develop a whole host of different products from these crops. So it's all very, very interesting work. But as part of that, they are looking at women's embedded knowledge in these crops, and I think the evidence shows quite strongly that when it comes to these opportunity crops, that women are really the knowledge holders in Africa, Asia, and globally, and there's no doubt about it. But the minute you start,
the same in Latin America. Yeah,
the same in Latin America, it's very, very strong, and indigenous knowledge of men and women in these crops is really strong, and they attach so many values to these different crops. So that when you look at bioindicators and things, it's important to cast the net really wide to say what kind of values, what kind of indicators are we capturing? Like what is it can be very limited, because you might be having, I'm speculating actually, but as scientists, formally trained scientists, you might look for matching indicators in the indigenous knowledge systems, but there could be so many more indicators that people are using, which could be of great value to capture. And these crops have existed for millions of years, essentially, but tens of thousands of years, like being used by people. So I think it's a wonderful way to go. It's a great suggestion from Caroline, I think it was.
Okay, well, unless maybe there isn't any final questions, I think we can start the wrap up. There's just a few things to tell you before we finish, but are there any kind of closing reflections, Anna Maria, that you'd like to share? I know that there's going to be an invitation maybe to join a kind of learning group. Would you like to pitch that to people before we share the slide, or any final reflections before we just wrap up today?
Sure. No, I think we've seen also by the questions in the chat and the people participating today, that this is a topic that is very relevant for the CGIAR, but also other organizations working in agriculture and working with the smallholder farmers. It's very relevant, and I think there is a need to have more learning across organizations, and that's why we are creating these groups, these learning groups. So the idea, and we are putting these tools and this kind of thinking out there, right, for people to try it out and see if it works, how they works for them, how they can also maybe adapt it, how can they improve it, um, and we want to know that we want to know how people is taking that up, how people can use it and make it more visible, right? So getting a bit of that role of learning, of synthesizing those learnings from different practitioners and different organizations. And that's a bit that call that Jessica was saying. And we do this in every of these webinars. The tools are out there. If anyone is interested, is working already maybe on climate information services, I know there's at least one person who knows PICSA, but maybe others got excited about it now during this talk, and maybe you can go and talk to your colleagues who work on climate information services. Some of them might have heard of PICSA. If you are interested in this, even if you're interested only in this gender, like adaptations with it and not the whole process, it would be great if you can sign up in a sheet that Jessica is going to share a QR code in a minute, and tell us how do you want to participate. Like if you think you can use this tool, again, even part of it doesn't have to be the whole thing. And you are interested in learning how to do it, or you're willing to tell us how did it go for you, what adaptations did you do, how did it work on the field, the information you got, the results you got. That would be super valuable for us. And also we are hoping that by sharing and by gathering this information, we are able to make it visible for others in other organizations and where we're working with this topic. So that's the QR now there. You can go into that QR and just fill in some basic information. For those of you who may think that might use some of these tools, or the whole PICSA, or just some part of it, or are interested in learning more, you just have to sign up, put your name, and we will get in touch with you. And hopefully we can build a community and sometime, discuss more about how to do this better.
Thanks so much, Anna Maria. The link is also in the chat if for any reason you can't scan the QR code. But yeah, we would love to have a few people join a more intensive learning group together on these tools. Oh, that's taking me through to the Zoom registration. Let me just try that one again. I just have one final thing to share with you all. Oh, that's because which is when our next webinar is. Oh, here we go. We have 1 minute to close, but yeah, big thank you to Anna Maria for sharing her experience and her knowledge and learning today. We will be back to unbox another tool in the toolkit on the 16th. I can't see that. Is that correct? The 16th of July. And this one is Seeing Women Behind Value Chains, a Typology for Gender Transformative Research. There is also a link in the chat to the toolkit, so you can also explore these tools yourself ahead of coming to the webinars. That might help you bring your questions. And just to say that this is, all part of the Gender Equality and Inclusion Accelerator. So thank you for their support and thank you all for participating. There is also a link if you're not already a member of the Gender Transformative Research Methodologies Community of Practice. There is a link to join in the chat as well, and we would love to see you there. So thank you everyone for your time today, for joining, for your questions. Take care, stay cool if you're in the heat wave, and hopefully we'll see you next month. Thanks everyone.
Thank you everyone. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Jessica and Kathy.